This video is going to talk about observation techniques and with specific regard to the trip reports you'll be writing for this class. Observation is a primary type of research that people conduct in just about every field. There's primarily two types of observation, the naturalistic observation and participant observation. Naturalistic observation is when you are observing people, places, and or things in their natural setting without their awareness of it. So some of the benefits of that would be that you're able to see things as they really are. You limit the observer effect, which is the idea that if you observe something, the situation or whatever you're observing is going to change just because you're observing it. Some of the drawbacks would be that you have the possibility of getting quote-unquote caught and asked to leave. So if you are worried about trying a naturalistic observation and not getting permission beforehand to observe, you can go to a more public place where that wouldn't be a problem. For example, like a library where people normally go and sit around and people watch. In participant observation, you are observing people, places, and or things with their knowledge and sometimes with their participation. The benefits is that you have permission for observation, so you're allowed to be there. There's no reason why they would question you for coming there or try to kick you out. And sometimes you can even ask them questions about what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, if it's a normal kind of day, something like that. Some of the drawbacks would be that this is the maximum observer effect, where if people know that you are there observing them, they change their behaviors intentionally and unintentionally. And in most cases, if you're observing a business, you're going to see them at their best if they know that you're observing them. When you are trying to observe someone, you're going to have trouble with focusing in. So observing people, observing places and things, you can actually only focus and process one thing at a time. So be aware of your limitations. Don't try to take in everything all at once. It's best if you do some geographic observations where you start in one location and view, say, the left side of the room and then slowly make your way viewing to the right side of the room, and you're able to focus in on things that catch your attention and process them. To help you with this assignment, you should plan on what you want to focus on ahead of time. So for this assignment, you get to choose observing employees, customers, environment, or services. So if you can pick one of those before you get there or immediately after you arrive, that will help you so that you can somewhat ignore all of the other activity that's going on that really won't help you in writing your report. Make sure that you use your senses. You have 5 of them. For whatever reason, we tend to focus too much on sight and then sound after that. However, sight is very limiting if you can't take into account what you're hearing, what you're smelling, what you're tasting, touching. Use those 5 senses appropriately based on your subject. So if you're in a restaurant, for example, it would probably be definitely appropriate to smell and taste food. However, if you are observing a business and there's nothing really important about smell or taste, it would be weird if you, say, got on the ground and licked the sidewalk outside of the business, right? So make sure that you are using your 5 senses appropriately, but don't just rely on sight. A huge component of this assignment is taking what's called field notes, and you need to take plenty of notes when you're out observing your business. It's better to write something down when it happens so that you'll remember it for sure in the future. You can at some other time decide whether or not to use that detail based on its importance or significance to your project. The idea behind this is that you will forget 80% of what you observed within 4 hours. So unless you're going to sit down and start writing your report immediately, which is normally not the case, you should have notes so that you can remember what you saw and not just remember the big picture, but the little details as well. After you've observed your location and you have your field notes, usually you want to ruminate for a little bit. You want to think about things, give yourself a day or two to just process what happened. Then, after about a day or two, sit down with your notes and figure out what was important or significant to your topic, to your subject, whatever you were paying attention to, observing, and also what's important to the assignment. You have both the assignment prompt, and you should have already then picked one of the 4 options for what you were going to zoom in on and observe. So, for example, if I was going to observe the customers and really try to figure out who actually is using this business, then I would definitely want to zoom in on that. And if there are notes that are supplementary to that but not really important, I can actually cross them off or just ignore them by highlighting all of the important notes that I have taken. So, for example, if I was going to observe the Hennepin Tech Library, I have in the past sat down and watched students interacting for 10-15 minutes at a time. This was actually in the old library that was sunk into the middle of the building. And what I realized is that students typically did not use the library for standard library purposes. The idea that you go in there to get a book or you get help from a librarian. Most often what I observed would be students sitting on the computers, playing, using Facebook, actually talking, meeting with groups of friends. So if I had a bunch of details about that, my main idea of significance is that the library in a college might serve more as a meeting spot and a place of interaction and communication, either physically in person or over the internet, than it traditionally has served in the past as a collection of knowledge. So you should at this point plan what you want to include in your reports. I suggest using a highlighter or starring the details that you think to be really important. And then make sure that you keep your notes all the way through to the end of the final draft. Make sure that you keep your notes. When you're planning material, remember that you want to answer the 6 journalist questions when you are writing your rough and final draft. So when you're planning what you're going to talk about, remember the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So who's involved, including yourself, what are you doing, what are you observing, when did the observation take place, and be very specific, date, time, year, everything like that, where you observed, and be very specific. Don't say I observed McDonald's, because there are thousands in the US, right? So say which McDonald's you observed. That's going to be very important for your readers to know. Make sure you indicate the why, and we'll talk more about creating purpose statements in class. But you'll need to have a statement of purpose pretty early on in your trip report that indicates, what is the purpose of this? What are you trying to do? And in this case, you have a class assignment where I'm sending you out to observe a business and then report on it so that you can have some practice with putting together trip reports. But in the future, when you're in a place of business or somewhere where you're working, you could get an assignment for any number of reasons, and you need to make that obvious to the reader. Finally, how this is important because you're doing primary research. You're physically going there and observing firsthand. So you need to indicate that to the reader that you spent so much time gathering this information firsthand. All right. Thank you for listening.